Um, yeah, that's when Daly will occasionally blur his background when we've done stuff, but it's more of like he doesn't give a shit. I don't give a shit, but his wife is like, the bed isn't made.
Right, right,
Like,
right.
and John's
Yeah,
like, that
exactly.
is the least of the problems of what this place looks like. But you know, um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Wait, where have you been the past? Like, where was the corporate gig?
it's
Was it
like
around here?
Iowa.
Iowa. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it was for like a medical something or other, but not even doctors. It was like some medical organization. It was just doing half hour of comedy, basically.
Okay. Corporate
So
clean.
not too bad. First time I'd heard from Kate in I don't know,
Yeah.
probably close to a year.
Was the money any good?
It was like 1,600 per
Yeah.
thing, and there was two of them. So that's nice. It added
Yeah, it's
up. I
not bad.
mean, also like traveling out there takes away about like traveling and renting a car takes away about a grand. Also, with the car I rented, I had a dicey scenario getting back to the airport yesterday where I had the like low tire pressure alarm come on when I
Oh,
was like
jeez.
12 miles from the airport, and then
Yeah.
the meter, like, it just kept losing a pound of air per like minute or
Yeah,
so.
that's
So
not great.
it was like a real race against time to like not get a flat on the way back to the
Jeez.
airport. But fuck them,
Did
they
you have
can
to
deal
pay for
with it.
anything, or did you have insurance?
I have insurance, but like, yeah, I don't even know. Like, it seemed like it was pretty rapidly losing air, but also that ain't my fault. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what the rules are about like a flat tire, but
Wow.
yeah. So
Huh.
we'll see. But
Nice.
anyway, all right. And you're flying out soon?
Yeah, I'm flying out to Denver today, and then I've got shows in Boulder all weekend.
Cool. Nice.
A little club out there.
Good deal.
Hell yeah. Shall we get to it? And then I'll hop in the shower and go to the airport.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Alrighty. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Away Games, a Chicago Cubs and baseball podcast hosted by two comedians who live in New York but love the Cubs all the same. I'm one of them. My name is Adam Mamawala. I'm here with Kevin McCaffrey. We're both in the same city, but not for long. I'm heading to
Oh,
Colorado in like an hour or two.
get
But
out.
yeah, Kevin's been in Iowa. He's been scouting for the Des Moines Cubs. But
Mm-hmm.
here we are. And
I
how
kept
you feeling?
telling Morel to leave. Get out of here. Go, please. You don't. It's like when you in a movie when they throw rocks at a dog that they love, but they know he's got
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
get out because the war's coming or something.
I remember that
Morel,
at the end of
please go to
Harry and the
Chicago.
Hendersons. You ever see
Mm-hmm.
Harry and the Hendersons with John Lithgow?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
That movie made
probably.
me cry a lot as a kid. It
Oh,
seemed very mean.
it's brutal. That's
Yeah.
maybe the most iconic example of that trope. But yeah, doing that to Morel and Mervis, and just trying to do anything I can to convince the 26 best Cubs to be at the Cubs right now, the
Well,
Chicago ones.
I mean, I'm not saying we didn't manifest it. The focus of our last podcast was, I assume, the same as much of Cubs land, which was, hey, can we please have Morel and Mervis up on the big league team? Now, I don't know that Morel would have necessarily gotten the call up, or gotten the opportunity that he's getting if not for Nico going down, but I think
Hmm.
it was already trending that way anyway.
Yeah.
Now I just want him to be in the lineup. Meowrel, as you pointed out last night with his his eye black.
Is kitty cat eye black going on, which we simply love. Christopher Morel. That's the kind of high level stuff you get at Away Games Pod. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram and all the things. Yeah, I think he's been literally the best hitter, I believe, in any level of
Yeah,
baseball in America. I think
his
like
OPS is like, it seems not real.
no, it's absurd. So he's just been completely on fire down at AAA, and I think part of the thing is, David Ross said we didn't really see a path to very regular playing time for him. All the outfielders are going to be playing every day, and also Morel. We think of him as a guy who plays a bunch of different positions, but he's basically primarily played center field in Iowa this year. Part of that is
Yeah.
because a guy named Jake Slaughter, who's never on a prospect list, but just keeps kicking the shit out of the ball, stealing bases, and playing well everywhere, has been playing at second base, I think, in
Hmm.
Iowa. So I think unfortunately Nico went down with a hamstring issue, and they said it's more day to day, right? Is what the
That's what they said, but it's concerning because it's the same hamstring that he injured last year and cost him 6 weeks. So I would assume
yeah.
that the Cubs are going to be fairly cautious with him. And when you look at the replay and you see his face coming around second, going into third, it doesn't look like a minor thing to me. Like maybe it was, and obviously the fact that he's not on the well, I don't know. The fact that he's not on the IL is one of two things: he's not that hurt,
Yeah.
or the Cubs are being the Cubs, and they're going to put him on the IL after having him take up a roster spot for no reason for the next 6 days.
Yeah. So I think it's extra good to have Morel here because you can put him at second, and it is funny they're having him play second and Madrigal play third, and I understand why, because you're having Madrigal get used to third, and he's been good over there. Although you're flipping those two guys' natural positions, you know. Um, but I think with Morel there right now, there's no reason to rush Nico back, and I also
Yeah,
think even after Morel's been up for what 2 3 games, I think at this point as we're speaking now, and I I just don't know how you send him back down. He's all like he just all makes such an impact already, energy wise. Everyone's talking about how how much he brings to that clubhouse in terms of positivity and energy, and he's been hitting the ball too, which is really nice. He hits it really hard.
right. But in that case, I mean, does that mean that if you keep him on the big league team, which I think he should be on, who goes in that case? I mean, do you cut Hosmer? Do you like? I don't know
Yes.
that. Yeah, I mean, I think so, right? Yeah,
I think so too. I mean, we're into the second month of the season, and Hosmer is what he is, and no offense, Eric Hosmer, he is not why the team's under 500.
yeah.
I think we continue to see him get DH time when you shouldn't have a guy who's a below average hitter at DH.
He's our
You
new
just
he's our new Hayward, and I say that with love and respect and admiration for everything that Hayward meant to the Cubs. But like when Hosmer stepped to the plate with the bases loaded the other night and 1 out, everybody in the world thought to themselves, "This is probably going to be a fucking double play, isn't it?" And it was.
it's just been a real week and a half of Hosmer coming up in key moments too, and almost to the point where you feel bad for him. And I think that was a Hayward thing for a while too, where he just kept finding himself in places where it was going to be very. There was going to be like a spotlight on how bad this is about to go, and
Right.
so I do
But to
think
be clear, like I don't want to take the blame away from David Ross because unless the lineup is coming from Jed Hoyer, and maybe that's the case, this
shouldn't
isn't
be.
like signups to audition for the High School Musical. Like Eric Hosmer is not running into the clubhouse and writing himself into the six hole. Like someone is doing that, and he shouldn't be there.
Yeah, a whole series of someone's has put him in this position. It's not Eric Hosmer's fault. It's not his fault that he's on the team.
No,
It's not
he is
his fault.
smart. He is
Yeah.
kind. He is beautiful.
He is important I mean, not to this team, I don't think. They say to the clubhouse, okay, but he cannot be that meaningful in a clubhouse when he just showed up too.
Right.
It's not like if this is Anthony Rizzo was slumping, if only, still
Mhm.
in the clubhouse or something. He's also, as you say, he's not writing himself into the DH spot. He's not writing himself into the lineup ahead of, a major league home run leader in Patrick Wisdom, which we're finding him higher up in the lineup than all these guys who are more threatening hitters. And it's just, it's not his fault because he's not making any of those choices. Those choices are
Mhm.
made by the front office and by David Ross, etc. I think, yeah, you do if there is a crunch and the decision is between Morel and Hosmer. You already have two first basemen. We were doing the thing with three catchers, which you can explain that to me, and I'll be like, okay, that is an angle. Three first basemen on a team, I
Yeah.
don't. It just doesn't make
Right.
sense. So I think Hosmer is who you send down. You could also send down Nick Madrigal, who's played really good defense over at third. He's got the option left though, and I Madrigal's an interesting case because I watch him play and I'm like, I wish he just had he I wish he was just really good at one other tool. I wish he
Hmm.
had like Terrence Gore speed. Then you could really justify him
Yeah.
on this team with the contact rate and playing good defense at third. But it's just it's it's such a weak bat that he really needs everything to go right
Right.
to have to carry any value there. So,
Well, he had a double the other night, and it was I mean, I'm not trying to be mean to the guy, but
hmm.
it seemed like it was as hard and as far as he could hit the ball, and it only got into the gap because they play him like you play the the weak kid in Little League, where you're like, bring it in,
Yeah.
everybody. Nicky's up. Nicky Madrigal is up. He's not. I mean, he's the same size as Jose Altuve, but the power is fairly different, I would say.
Yes, and he's sitting here right now with a 70 WRC plus. That's 30% worse than league average offensively. And as good as he's been defensively at third, we're kind of covered at third otherwise with guys who can do more than that. And Madrigal a week ago was this is how quickly things change at this point in the season, but a week and a half ago he was basically doing as well as you could possibly have him do. He was hitting over 300. He's on basing just a touch
Yeah.
over that. He doesn't really oh man, I'm looking at the Fangraphs page for Nick Madrigal, and I think they got to update some of these tools. They got him at a 60 speed rating at a which is, I think that's a little faster than he is, as
Yeah.
we saw him try to score from third the other day too, and it didn't go so well, I believe on a
Right.
tag up play. But I think those are the things. I think what you do is Eric Hosmer is not going to be on this team at the end of the year in a world in which you're competing. I just
Right.
don't see that happening. And we've talked about the prospects the Cubs are excited about too. There's just the roster is only going to have more of a crunch as we go. Fingers crossed. He's just not going to be there. So why are we waiting around?
Yeah, and again, none of this is his fault, and I have no doubt that he is trying his hardest, but like to be a designated hitter implies that you hit.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, I don't think that you should be in that spot. And anytime I hear this argument about like, well, he's a great clubhouse guy and he's like valuable in other ways that are not on the field, then offer him a job as a fucking bench coach. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but he's
Mm-hmm.
either good enough to be on the team as a player or he's not. And he just isn't. So
Yeah.
it is encouraging to see Mervis up. We got to see, so to kind of like recap and backtrack a little bit. In this past week, we have seen Amaya come up out of necessity because Jan Gomes was out. Now Amaya has been sent back down, but he's in Iowa rather than Tennessee, which is like a nice middle ground for him. He had jumped straight from Double A to the pros. He had
Mm-hmm.
honestly a better week than I think his numbers would indicate. Like
Definitely.
he kind of ran into some bad luck hitting the ball hard and hitting it right at people or people making good plays. He did get that first major league hit, which was cool to see and a cool moment with his family. But all that to say, we've seen Mervis come up. He got a big hit for his first career hit. Got a couple other big knocks. He's not blowing the world away. I think he's batting like 220. But we've got Mervis up. We've got Morel up. But when we recorded last week, the Cubs had split the first two in DC, and I think we left the podcast saying you really got to win both of these games, and the Cubs lost both of those games. So they
Mm-hmm.
lost two more in DC. They lost 3 out of 4 to one of the worst teams in baseball, which is let me check my notes here, not good.
Mm-hmm.
And then they won 2 of 3 against the Marlins, but really should have won all three. The game on
Mm-hmm.
Sunday was one of those incredibly frustrating games, which reminds me why I'm not that upset about the Ghost Runner. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
remember watching those games growing up, and it would be like 6 hours of my life, and then they would lose, and I'd be like, why did I do this?
Sure, and
Just
even
every
this
opportunity to win.
and even this one went what 14 innings. They had five
Yeah,
chances, I believe. I think it was five,
right,
but to win the game with a single of any kind, and just
right.
and just couldn't do it. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. So I mean, we had the energy around this team was like, holy shit, they're good. The plan worked when it was 11-6 or whatever, and now we're sitting here a game under 500, I believe, as we talk now.
Yeah.
And I think that is pretty real because what seems to be real to me is the starting pitching is good. Like the starting
Hmm.
pitching is good.
Yeah.
Justin Steele, I tweeted this too, but I think Justin Steele gets a lot of Lester comparisons,
Yeah.
and I think that's because of sort of just how he looks out there, the lefty thing out there, and how he attacks hitters and maybe some of his demeanor. But to me, he's starting to remind me more of a Kyle Hendricks in the way that he just keeps being an ace and people keep being suspicious about it. Where
Right.
people are like, oh, well, he can't possibly be this good. Just, I
Yeah,
mean,
because
he
he
can't.
doesn't throw 100.
Right. And still, like, he can get it up to 95, every once in a
Right.
while, but he sits more like, 92-ish. And he just, I think he's what the scoreboard says he is, which is by ERA, basically
Right.
the best pitcher in baseball over the last year. I'm not saying he's going to be Jacob deGrom forever, but he's really good and he's
Hmm.
going to continue to be good, I
And he
think.
also seems to get the run support that Marcus Stroman doesn't get, so that doesn't hurt in terms of if you're looking at his wins and losses.
Right. Yeah, Stroman's been extremely good and cannot get an ounce of run support at all. I'm sure there's a conspiracy behind that Marcus would like to tweet about for why he's not getting run support, I'm sure. But I think I think the starting pitching's real, but I think when we see, like, how are they under 500 right now? I think it's because the lineup it was going bonkers the first part of,
Yeah.
the first month of the season. Like, Dansby's not going to hit 400. His power is starting to show up a little
Hmm.
more now, which is nice. Bunch of doubles and a homer the series against the Cardinals, and I think the offense is going to come down a bit, and there's guys to dream on here, but the guys to the upside this lineup needs just sort of showed up in guys like Mervis and
Yeah.
Morel.
I think the reason that I'm optimistic is that this roster right now is better than the roster on opening day, right? We've
Yeah,
got
definitely.
Mervis on the team, we've got Morel on the team, we've got Hendricks coming back. He just had another rehab start in AAA where I think he went 5 scoreless innings, no walks, looked pretty sharp. I think he probably will still make at least another start or two as they build up his endurance, but like that's encouraging for him to come back. All of this has been happening with Jamison Tyone really struggling in his first couple months on the Cubs. And the fact of the matter is, this may be a division where the best team wins 83 games, right? And that
Hmm.
doesn't mean that if whoever that is going to do anything in the playoffs, but as we saw with the Phillies last year or the Cardinals many times in their godforsaken history, if you get into the playoffs, you have a shot. And right now, as I look at the Cubs standings in the Central, the best record that any team has in their last 10 games is the Cubs, tied with the Reds, having gone 4-6 in their last 10. The
Yeah,
Cardinals have
elite baby.
won. The Cardinals are 3-7, and of course, two of those were against the Cubs. Thanks so much for that, Cubs. The Brewers are 2-8, and the first place Pittsburgh Pirates are 1-9. So the Cubs are
Wow.
2 games back in the loss column. They're 2.5 games out in the division as an 18-19 team. And if the Cubs were in really any other division other than the equally shitty AL Central, they would be way back, but they're not. And
Yeah.
so my feeling is like, I'm not going to assume that everything that's been good to this point will continue to be good and everything that's bad will get better. But I do think it's not crazy at this point in the season to look at the 18-19 Cubs and be like, yeah, there's no reason they still can't win this division.
I think that's absolutely true, and that I was not super optimistic on how good this team was built to be coming into this
Yeah.
year. I don't think they built it up as a serious enough contender as they could and should have, and as the Cubs could and should have. That holds true, but yes, this division sucks, and I had missed that the Pirates went a full 1-9 over the last 10. That's crazy,
Yeah.
but that's basically almost already pissed away the crazy amount of wins they stacked up.
Yeah.
They're only 4 games over 500 right now. Cubs are only 2.5 back of that. So to me, that's nothing. That's gone. The
Right.
Cubs roster is significantly better than the Pirates roster. That is not saying much of anything
Right.
at all, but it's true. And the Brewers have struggled with some pitching health too, and they need those aces to be there. So I mean. And the Cubs right now sit 5.5 games ahead of the Cardinals, which isn't nothing. But I mean, it's
Listen, it's not
obvious.
going to surprise me at all if the Cardinals look like absolute dog shit and then win the division. Like that will not surprise me one bit.
I mean, the Cardinals basically would have to make up a game a month on the Cubs from here to the end of the season, and that's pretty doable, you know. So that's a hot stretch. So I think it's going to end up being between the Brewers, Cardinals, and Cubs at the end still, which is, I mean, maybe that's just my dumb brain overrating the Cardinals still, who are sitting here, I mean, doing terribly. 13 wins is the least in the National League right now,
Yeah,
you
but
know?
that's all Wilson Contreras' fault. You know that.
It's all Willson Contreras. Even when he's DH and he makes their
Hmm.
pitchers suck. They're pitchers who sucked last year. But when Yachty was there, the pitchers who sucked, still Willson Contreras' fault. It is, yeah, it is amazing. And people are saying that, now that Wilson isn't catching for, I don't know, an indefinite amount of time until he finishes his coursework behind the scenes in the Cardinal way or
Jesus
whatever the
Christ.
deal is.
Yeah.
Like now people are like, yeah, that's a terrible contract. But is it? Wouldn't you pay that much to have someone to blame for everything that goes wrong, no
Yeah.
matter what, even if he's not on the field for it? It's really impressive. And obviously that's another thing. Good for us for not getting into that until this minute of the podcast, I would say. But man,
I think anyone
the
who listens to this podcast knows where we stand on all of it.
Yeah, but I guess this was, it's like it is something to address because this was the return weekend, and we
Yeah.
we saw Wilson come back, and just along the lines of us joking about kind of a real thing, Wilson getting blamed for everything. Uh, Patrick Mooney of the Athletic said, talking about the Cubs, he said the pitching infrastructure shares in the credit when things go well while losing 90 games a year, and then Wilson gets blamed for whatever areas he didn't measure up. I think is a lot of how things worked here with the Cubs,
Yeah.
and it's interesting to see that happening for the Cardinals
Right.
too.
If people pitch well, it's because they're great pitchers. If they pitch poorly, it's because Wilson doesn't call a good game.
Yes. Now, were you watching the return game? The
I did not watch it live. I was
Mhm.
watching some of the pregame, and I saw when they kind of showed the tribute video, and he was standing out there, and it seemed like the vibe was generally fine. I
Mhm.
think I forget if we talked about this on the podcast or just in our ongoing group chat with our boy Ken Schultz, but I believe it was Sahadev Sharma wrote a piece about like Cubs Twitter is not Cubs fans as a whole, and I think that's important to remember just about Twitter in life. Like Twitter is
Mhm.
not representative of reality. It's representative of people who care the most about a particular thing, talking a lot about it, and they are a very small subset of fans of anything. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I actually was pleasantly surprised
It
at how
it
things went. Like it didn't seem like this overwhelming cascade of boos, and Wilson was playing into it and getting people to boo him after he singled, but
Well, yeah, I have a couple of notes for the coverage of it, I think, because yeah, I think it was a thing where I think you would say mostly cheers on the first at bat and when he was shown on the screen announced at the beginning. It was more than 50% cheers with some audible boos. You could hear the boos and you could see how he was reacting when he was hearing the boos because he was tipping his cap to the crowd. He was showing respect to the crowd, who he wrote a big thank you note for when he left, thanking the fans and all that.
mhm.
People love to forget that and pretend like that never happened. He's only ever said bad things, of course. But you could tell once he was registering the booze, he was smiling a bit. He was smiling about it. And I thought, being a group of fans who watched Wilson Contreras for so many years, you can tell the difference between when he's genuinely furious and when he's having fun. And
Right.
this, when I saw the coverage of it saying, and I think Sahadev said this too, like Wilson turning full heel. Okay, heel is a wrestling term for bad guy. This is not what heel means. If you give me the backstory of a guy who comes up with a team, never wants to leave, thanks the fans, even before the game was saying, even though I'm wearing a different uniform, that doesn't mean I don't love them. Don't see that getting a huge amount of publicity, but he did say that. When that happens and he shows up and then he gets booed and he reacts to the boos, guys, that's what we call babyface in the wrestling
Mhm.
business. That is a hero's journey that is not turning heel. And
Yeah.
it's not trolling. We have a very popular Cubs blog being like, Wilson's trolling here. It's not trolling to react to being booed. That is the opposite. That's just not what trolling means. But what he did was once he got the hit and the people were booing, he did the hands up and like, come on, you can
Yeah.
break. But he was smiling. He's
Yeah.
having fun. This is show business. Like I
Hmm.
thought it was great.
Yeah. I this is what I want to say to anyone who's listening to this. Give me one example of a time when Wilson said anything negative about the fans ever. Ever.
It's it's a great question, Adam.
Eh,
We're the organization, apparently. The amount of which the full quote was this, for me. This is a better organization. Makes sense. It's the one that's paying him and wanted to value him. Uh, that seems to be a
You
big
know
part.
what? You know what? Let's not even give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's say that
Sure.
it's not even related to like they gave me a contract the Cubs didn't, right? Let's just
Yeah.
say he is saying as a fact the Cardinals organization is a better organization than the Cubs organization. Make
Yeah.
the case that that's wrong.
Yeah. It
I hate
is.
the
It is.
Cardinals more than almost anything in the world.
Yeah.
Make the case that that's
Yes.
not accurate.
Yeah. I I think using numbers and stuff, it's pretty difficult, unfortunately. You know,
Stop
yeah.
trolling me with your facts and numbers, Kevin.
It's just he's going full troll job, trying to win for the team he's on. Yeah, it was a silly weekend. Also, I think we remember when Wilson would piss off other teams, right?
Yeah.
Did we're the Cubs fans who are most angry at Wilson right now, when other teams would get pissed at Wilson, would we be sitting here going, "Man, the other team's right. He's being a real dick about this one," or were we going, "Jesus, why are you babies getting so upset about this? The guy's
Right.
intense. He's having fun out there. Like it's you weird losers who are being so sensitive about a guy expressing himself on the field and playing hard for his team." How can we have the cognitive dissonance to not
Yeah.
understand that we're the babies now, dog? If you're getting upset about this in a genuine way, it's just like, you're such a mark. I don't know how
Right.
you're playing yourself this way. It just seems crazy to me. And I thought he was like the vibe. We've seen him be pissed. It's scary when he's pissed. He was he was having a good time, and
Yeah, we've
it
seen
was
photos all week of him like taking pictures with fans and chatting with people outside the stadium and still being who he is, which is like, as far as I can tell, a pretty nice dude.
and Morel like jumping
Yeah.
into his arms when he showed up. That
Yeah.
obviously last year, like Wilson was such a
See, he
good
can
welcome.
catch.
Yes, he can see how he framed Morel right there perfectly. Yeah, I don't know. I love Wilson. I'll love Wilson forever. I think some Cubs fans have been particularly embarrassing in a way that I haven't been embarrassed about Cubs fans not most of them, but in a
Yeah.
large sense like this since Bartman times. And I
Oh,
yeah.
my favorite thing in the past week or two, as everything was ramping up towards this series, was look at Wilson's numbers in the 2016 playoffs. Like he didn't even do anything for us. Oh yeah, do you want to go back and watch the highlights of Game 4 in the NLDS against the Giants and tell me who
Mhm.
got that base hit up the middle that allowed the
Mhm.
Cubs to not go back to Chicago and lose to Johnny fucking Cueto? Do you want to do that? Do you want to look at any other big hit he got throughout the playoffs? Like, are we really going to play that game?
Well, and just the catcher who was most comfortable catching Aroldis Chapman, too, of the three of them, would
Hmm.
he would come in to match up with him if catching matters. He was one who could match up with Chapman there during those playoffs. That's always such a funny dumbass hater move too, when it's like you take a guy's whole career and you go back to one or two games and be like, but look at the stats here. It doesn't matter, so therefore he should be Thanos into non-existence, and the team would have been the same.
Yeah.
It's a pretty immature way to look at things. So I don't know. It's I think I think people are like playing heel is not understanding the whole situation, but it's over. Everyone who wants to talk that way or wants to feel that way is going to continue to. It's good for clicks.
Hmm.
It's good to get people fired up in your Twitter mentions if you're a blog. I understand that. Uh, but whatever. I think it's pretty silly, and I'm glad that first week back is over. Special shout out to our friend comedian Joe Kilgallen too, who was there really in person representing basically everything we're talking about, I think,
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely. And in a pretty awesome coat, I might add. Very much
Very
like
good. Very good.
the Ken Schultz kind of throwback 80s 90s Cubs vibe. So to look ahead, and then I wanted to get your thoughts on one other thing. We in the past couple of weeks we've talked about like what the Cubs need to do over this stretch, and the Cubs have not done it. The first 10 games of this month, they have had four in DC, and then a homestand against the Marlins and the Cardinals. They've gone 4-6 against teams that frankly you probably should have been looking at like a 7-3 if you're actually a good team. And now you face the it's a 10-game road trip. You face the first place Twins, which doesn't mean a whole lot, but they are still the first
I
place
can't
Twins.
believe the Twins are in first
I
place. They
know.
cannot hit a ball. Correa's getting booed over
No.
there.
Yeah. But then we go to Houston, and then we go to Philadelphia. That is followed by a series back in Wrigley against the Mets, who are underachieving but are still a good team. And then the Reds, and then the best team in baseball, the Tampa Bay Rays. So nothing would surprise me at this point. Like the Cubs have done this thing where they play pretty well against good teams, they play not so well against bad teams. Real Bullsian sort of vibe
Yeah.
from the Cubs, but they have also lost a lot of close games. And on one hand, you can say, well, good teams win close games. That's an indication that they're not a good team. But on the other hand, you can say they're in a lot of games. They're not getting blown out by people. So if now you are actually playing with the best roster that you can be, maybe that helps make up for the areas where you're lacking. But like, I'm not a sports bettor. I've been out of the sports betting game for a while, but I don't know if you bet on this team a lot. They're hard to predict. Like they scored 10 runs last night. They score I think one the night before. Like I don't know what we're gonna get from this team night to night.
No, I don't bet on the team. I will bet on individual results sometimes of the Cubs.
Yeah,
Otherwise, I leave my team betting to other teams. You know, try to
right.
take the heart out of it. I think yeah, this what we are seeing is something that I made fun of the sort of I made fun of the objective and the coverage of it when all the talk in the offseason was about like raising the floor, and I was like, I don't care. It's still the basement. Like,
Right.
don't tell me about the floor when you're the Chicago Cubs. We should be talking about the ceiling. Otherwise you're being unambitious in a way that I don't think is defensible.
Right.
So, but what we're seeing is the floor is higher because it is a team that can compete every day to some degree, and that was not what the team was last year. So you're going to win some against some teams you probably shouldn't generally beat, and you'll
Right.
lose some close ones too. So yeah, I mean, I think like looking at this stretch, it's a really difficult stretch. If the Cubs come out of this stretch in the same place they are right now, you'd have to say, all right, they're still very much right there for this dog shit NL Central division
Right.
competition. But I could see it dropping back. I mean, I came into the year, I think I predicted something like 78 wins for them. Like, I would
Yeah.
go higher than that now. I think, especially now that the better players are just forcing their way in, it wouldn't
I think I
surprise
said
me to.
like 84 or something like that. I feel like
I,
I was maybe a little bit higher than where you and Ken were.
yeah, and I think you're probably closer to what the roster's gonna be for most of the year, like to
Yeah.
the actual talent level of that. So
Yeah, but
it's
maybe
it,
we trade Bellinger. So, like we don't know how things
yeah.
are going to play out at this point.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing is it's going to be really weird because you're going to have the decisions on Bellinger and Stroman, two guys who probably could get you
Right.
back something of use,
Yeah.
especially when we're seeing David Robertson at last year's deadline was traded for Ben Brown, who's now like shooting up in the minor leagues. Just struck out 10 in his first start, I think in Tennessee.
Yeah.
But Ben Brown, we're probably going to see before the end of the year here. And that was what we got for David Robertson. So it's going to be in a position where do you trade a Stroman and or a Bellinger who could probably bring you back good stuff, or
I
or do
mean,
you ride with it?
obviously, I think as somebody who wants to see this team compete, I wouldn't be thrilled with it. But I think the only way that that makes sense is if the Cubs are basically where they're at now, which is like a few games under 500, like
Hmm.
technically in the mix, but not really looking that great.
Hmm.
I think you can make the case for trading both of them and trying to get back major leaguers. I do not want some 16-year-old prospect. Like, yes, I'm
Right.
great if he works out in 2029, but like we can't
Yeah,
be
I'm
playing
I'm
that way
dead by
forever.
then, so who gives a shit?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So like, um, if you're making those trades and it's the Hoyer equivalent of Epstein trading Samardzija and being like, "This is the last time we're doing this. I
Mm.
swear we
Yeah.
are building something here," then maybe I'm okay with it. But yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see how it plays out. The last thing, go ahead if you
No,
want to
you go
comment.
ahead. Yeah.
Last thing I want to ask you about, I saw you retweeted that article that I believe Michael Cerami wrote about the Cubs broadcast situation.
Yes.
Can you give us like a synopsis of what that said and your feelings on it before we get out of here?
Yeah, Michael Cerami, who works with Bleacher Nation, he tweeted out a really well thought out, significant piece, or like he wrote a full piece on Bleacher Nation, and we retweeted it at Away Games Pod, and it basically was analyzing and talking about his thoughts and issues on what marquee coverage has been, and it was a lot of individual points, and going through it all, I found myself thinking, I think all of this is for me, it seemed impossible to disagree with any of it.
Yeah.
He basically there were finer points about like in terms of marquee standalone streaming stuff and getting that together and that sort of thing and just trying to get it more accessible to people. But the main stuff was that I was really getting into was about the coverage of the team in terms of the broadcast booth, in terms of the production in game, how Marquee has way too much going on, trying
Yeah.
to just jam too many pieces into the
It
games
feels like
now.
a spring training style broadcast for the whole season.
100%. I think that's a very good way to put it. And, it's nothing against Taylor McGregor or Elise Menaker or or anyone else or any of the rotating people who come through the booth. It's nothing against anyone individually.
Well,
It's
except for
just
Jed
too
Hoyer. It is against Jed Hoyer
Jed
who's
Hoyer,
coming into
who's
the booth.
been in the booth twice now.
Yeah.
Jed, get on the phones, why don't you? Let's do that, okay? Yeah, it's not against anyone individually. It's just too much all the time, and especially when the games are shorter now. So part of good baseball broadcasting, to me, I think to many of us, is when they do get to breathe a little bit, and you
Yeah.
have a personality like JD in the booth who can give you a great story. You have Boog, who I do generally like, but I think there was also a bit in here about how Boog still has that very national style where you don't feel that much emotion depending on which way the game goes and how
Yeah.
you would like a little more homerism in your baseball
Yes.
booth. Like, I absolutely feel that because it feels like you say spring training games feel like they don't matter. To me, it does feel when it's especially when it's not JD, when I'm not hearing a lot of JD, it feels like a lot of some other team's broadcast to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And first of all, the three, I don't care who they are. I do not need or want a three-person booth. It's just too
Never.
many cooks in the kitchen, and it's not working for me. And again, this is nothing against Taylor McGregor, but like we don't need 5 minutes about the couple who met in the fucking bleachers. I don't care.
It should be a spice. It should not be a requirement to jam one of these stories in every game and to really
Yeah.
hang out with it. It has the feel sometimes too, and it's when it's like Boog busting balls with Taylor and stuff like that, and it has the feel to me of in Chicago, like the 101.9 The Mix morning radio show, where
Yeah.
it's just like, it's the host is teasing the weather girl, and it's just these like inside jokes that aren't really
Yeah.
landing for me a lot.
Right.
And it's they're this is the assignment for them that they have to be cross talking this much, and I just think we're not following the chemistry that's there, and then the chemistry is not ideal. Like I've said, Boog. It sounds like Boog is like not quite getting JD sometimes to me, and I think
Right.
JD's fantastic and want him forever. But
And Girardi is always kind of I don't want to say antagonistic, but he does seem to be like somewhat of a contrarian, and I don't know if that's on purpose or that's just kind of his vibe.
mm,
Um, but I think it would serve all of them well, and particularly Boog, to go back and watch some of the great broadcasters. Like go back and watch Vin Scully on the Kirk Gibson call and tell me how much he talks as Gibson is rounding the bases. He doesn't say a word for like 30 seconds.
mm.
And this is a person who's probably the best to ever do that job. But he understood when to let things just sit. And there's very little of that.
And I think so much of that is coming from Marquee itself. I
Hmm.
think so much of that is more
Well, you know what?
Marquee.
I've got some quiz for Marquee. I've got some
Here's a
real
quee.
quiz of the
Yeah.
game. It makes me queasy some of the time.
Yeah, yes, Marqueezy. It just I've worked for like TV productions in a way where like I know it just feels like network notes to me. It just
Yeah,
feel I can just like taste the interference coming from people behind the
yeah,
scenes on the
yep.
way this is going, and I think there is more talent in the booth than that. I mean, I would like it less quantity wise, but
Hmm.
Michael Cerami over at Bleacher Nation had the piece, and I think it's inarguable, like point by point, all the way down. It's a really good summation of that, and I would
Yeah,
love for that to go to Marquee and for them to friggin' read it.
right. And I think the fundamental point here is like, if you're Marquee and you have this product that you want to sell to people, get their feedback. Like I don't have a Marquee subscription, and perhaps this is already happening, but like I would be curious for anyone who does, and tweet at us at Away Game Spot if you're listening and you do. Like, is there any point at which they send out an email saying like, "Hey, we'd love to get your feedback on what you think of the broadcast so far this year"? Like, let the people who are watching it every day dictate how it is. Don't let some suit sitting wherever tell people what they think the experience should be, because like I don't know that most people watching every game want this. Like, stop trying to turn every Cubs game into ESPN Sunday Night Baseball, which is borderline unwatchable.
Yeah, because and the people running Marquee did come in from New York too. So I mean, this
Yeah.
is also I think that that sort of makes sense once you see it. It just has too much of a national feel. Baseball is a exceedingly local game. It's
Hmm.
probably the most local one of the major sports we have left, and it's yeah, it is. It could be better is the
Yeah, I
thing,
would
and
love
when
a
it's
little less pizzazz.
yeah, and on Sundays when it's like Pat Hughes and JD and they get
Hmm.
out of the way a little bit, you really feel what it can be.
Yeah.
So yeah, but a good piece, Michael Cerami. Follow him. Also follow Joe Kilgallen for you know, repping the side of good, in my opinion, this weekend over there at Wrigley. He's always got a bunch of recaps after the game he posts online too. So
Yeah.
that's I think that's all I got.
That's all I got as well. You know where to find both of us on the internets. We'll be back next week, hopefully talking about the above 500 Cubs, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
Please breathe. See Adam in Colorado at Away Games Pod. Goodbye.